Let's transition to the NFL. And we're talking about the NFL a lot, but it deserves it because it's the NFL. I want to talk about some possible landing spots for Aaron Rodgers. First of all, there's pros and cons to taking him. So, for context, right, in case you're unaware, Aaron Rodgers was basically fired from the Jets. The Jets said, we're moving on. Contract's expiring. We're not going to re-sign you. We want you to go somewhere else. We don't want you here anymore. So the Jets are going a different direction, which raises new questions, right? Because who are the Jets going to take? Are they going to get a guy in free agency? Or are they going to potentially draft a guy? Are they going to trade up? Are they going to stay where they are? Who's in that range from a quarterback perspective? The future of the Jets is very up in the air and very interesting. But for Aaron Rodgers, if you're another team in need of a quarterback looking for Aaron Rodgers, the pros and cons are taking him. Yes, it's a veteran, successful quarterback. He didn't have a bad year statistically last year, but he's considered by some toxic, right? And he's is a complicated social presence, right? He goes on Pat McAfee all the time. He talks a lot. He lets his feelings be known to everyone, and he's much older than everybody else in the locker room. So it's an interesting dynamic, and you really have to be built for that dynamic. So the criteria to me, I have a list of criteria of things that each team would need to have in order to be the right fit for Aaron Rodgers. Number one, they must need a quarterback, obviously. That eliminates most of the league. They must be at least somewhat a contender, either a team on the doorstep of the playoffs or a team on the doorstep of a Super Bowl. And it has to be somewhere that he will start. I've heard this idea that he could go to Chicago and back up Caleb Williams and mentor him. Great idea until you realize it's Aaron Rodgers on the Chicago Bears, and it's Aaron Rodgers with a young quarterback that is better than him. I don't think that from a personality perspective is going to mesh very well. I don't think Aaron Rodgers would enjoy that. I don't think that the Bears would enjoy that. I don't think that's going to happen. But we're looking at teams that are semi-contenders, rebuilding teams. Tennessee is a great example. Yeah, they need a quarterback most likely, but they can't waste 2 years on Aaron Rodgers, right? They can't waste a year on Aaron Rodgers because they're trying to rebuild, and just plugging Aaron Rodgers is just going to complicate things, and it's not like they're going to win a Super Bowl off of it anyway. And Aaron Rodgers at this point is in his career trying to win one more Super Bowl. Titans are in rebuild mode. Aaron Rodgers is a plug-and-play type of guy. You can't put Aaron Rodgers on a rebuilding team and then rebuild around him because you're just wasting time. That's what the Jets did, right? They rebuilt around Aaron Rodgers and thought they could win a Super Bowl, and that wasn't the worst idea, right? Brought in Alan Lazard, brought in everyone that Aaron Rodgers wanted to have on that team, right? Put them on the Jets, see if they can go to the playoffs, win a Super Bowl, and they didn't even come close, and that just is unfortunate, but it wasn't the worst idea moving in. But now we know the Jets failed. The Titans have the first pick in the draft. They were the worst team with the worst record in the NFL last year, right? So the Titans, for example, are not in position to bring on an Aaron Rodgers. It's got to be a team that is capable of winning Super Bowl, or at least capable of elevating to the next level under Aaron Rodgers. So after we take away all of those eliminated options, I'm left with really three. I would say three. I have a fourth one on here. I'll talk about it, but really three landing spots for Aaron Rodgers outside of retirement that could occur and make sense. Indianapolis is the first one. Now, because this is, of course, the Indianapolis Colts, I'm going to make a video or a segment. I'll make a segment about this. It'll come out as an individual YouTube video if you're watching that. You could see another one about Aaron Rodgers on the Colts in a couple days, either Wednesday or Friday. I'll do that episode. I'll talk about that. But Indianapolis, right? He could potentially teach AR, whether he's starting or a backup. I, of course, under my criteria, say that he would have to start. That's a fine idea, except the Colts aren't going to win a Super Bowl, especially if you plug in Aaron Rodgers, right? That'd be crazy PR with Pat McAfee and everything like that. But that will only set back AR, in my opinion, because one of the issues with Anthony Richardson at the moment stems from the fact that he didn't play a lot of games in college because he was injured and he went to the draft early, right? In my opinion, Anthony Richardson, part of his issue is lack of experience, and that shows itself in decision-making in certain moments. That shows itself in composure and in effort sometimes. Of course, talk about him taking a breather in that game at the beginning of the year. So I think AR needs experience, and that's what this year is going to prove to me, because if he plays 17 games, then we're going to have a real understanding of what AR with experience can be, and that will help give us a better idea of whether or not he's the next step, whether or not he's the guy, whether or not he's the franchise quarterback that the Colts need to invest and believe in. So it only set back AR if Aaron Rodgers starts, because, yeah, he can probably learn. I don't think Aaron Rodgers is going to be willing to teach him, because Aaron Rodgers is trying to be the guy and win a Super Bowl somewhere. I don't think Indianapolis is the move. It'd be a bold free agency move. Chris Ballard trying to be a little bit more gutsy. We want him to be more gutsy. But again, similar to the Myles Garrett situation, I don't think this is the move to make. I don't think this is the right fit for the Colts right now. I don't think Aaron Rodgers should go to the Colts. I hope he doesn't. If he does, then we'll accept it and move forward with it. And it'll be exciting. It definitely will be. But I don't think that's the right move for the Colts, given where they are and where they're trying to get at the end of next season in terms of their goals. Las Vegas is the next step. Brady, of course, is a minority owner, right? So he'd be paired with Tom Brady and Pete Carroll, which would be really fun and really interesting and potentially a dynamic that could be fun to watch, a dream team situation. I doubt Rodgers is at this point in his career either, where I don't think Vegas is a Super Bowl team yet. They're not ready to win a Super Bowl, and I don't think Aaron Rodgers is either, but putting Aaron Rodgers on the Raiders is not going to lift them to the playoffs or Super Bowl, in my opinion. It'll just be a repeat of the Jets. I don't think he should go there either, and we're really running out of options because there's only really one team that I want to talk about that has an opportunity. Pittsburgh's been in conversation, and I think they're going to be in talks with him. I don't think there's enough of a skill performance gap between Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson to justify bringing him to that locker room because of some of that complicated social presence essence, right? But also, what's interesting about Aaron Rodgers is the fact that Mike Tomlin with the Steelers really tries to keep things tight-knit. It's its own little bubble of the world. They try to keep things close to the program. They try to keep things close to the organization. Nothing really leaves the locker room, right? And that's totally fine. That's the way he does it, and it works. Aaron Rodgers is the opposite of that. He goes on Pat McAfee every week. He is very outspoken on social media and various shows, podcasts, whatever. He talks a lot, which is great for him. Totally fine. But that's not a good fit with the Steelers. And they have Russell Wilson and they have Justin Fields. There's no reason to add another quarterback into the mix, especially with how much they would likely have to pay Aaron Rodgers. Not the fit. Steelers, no chance of that happening, in my opinion. I don't think the Colts should happen. I don't think the Raiders should happen. The one that could, the only thing besides retirement, and we'll talk about the retirement outcome in a second. The only thing besides retirement that I think Aaron Rodgers could justify doing is going to the Minnesota Vikings, which would be hilarious because that's just exactly what Brett Favre did, right? He went to the Packers, he went to the Jets, he went to the Vikings, didn't really have much success after winning Super Bowls with the Packers, but regardless, this is a situation where J.J. McCarthy can learn from a truly great quarterback, right? J.J. McCarthy learned from Sam Darnold, and that was working very well. Sam Darnold was playing fantastically, but it felt like the Vikings might be just one elite quarterback away because really what was the Vikings' downfall, right? In the Lions game at the end of the regular season and then in the playoffs, their downfall was poor quarterback play, right? Darnold wasn't good, right? I don't have his stats in front of me, but he wasn't good, right, at the end of the year. Played great all season, did exactly what he needed to do, felt like Brock Purdy, and then collapsed at the end of the year. If they had an elite quarterback, they had Aaron Rodgers distributing the football, and whether or not you consider Aaron Rodgers elite at this point in his career is kind of irrelevant to me, right? If you have Aaron Rodgers distributing the football in those moments, I think there's a world, and I think there's a situation where the Vikings could go all the way and win a Super Bowl, right? They could be that caliber of a team. Maybe they're the 1 seed, and who knows, right? If Sam Darnold doesn't fall off a cliff in terms of performance and production at the end of the year for the Vikings, if that's Aaron Rodgers instead and he plays well, the Vikings could win a Super Bowl. So the Vikings feel like they could be one elite quarterback away from winning it all. The question is whether or not Aaron Rodgers is that, whether or not he is that guy that can lift the Vikings to that level. I don't know the answer to that question. I'd love to think about it if Aaron Rodgers goes to Minnesota. This is the only outcome that I feel like could happen. Because again, maybe he can teach J.J. McCarthy and make him the future the second that he leaves. They have kind of similar, I don't know, I don't want to say they have similar play styles, but still, they're two guys that J.J. McCarthy, young quarterback, could use a couple years understudying someone like Aaron Rodgers before starting. And maybe Sam Darnold sticks around and fills that role, but Rodgers could have a lot to teach him. And if he doesn't have a lot to teach him because he doesn't want to, from a personality standpoint, at least he has a lot to show him, right? So J.J. McCarthy could kind of be turned into Aaron Rodgers 2.0, theoretically, in this situation. I don't think so. I don't think that's how that dynamic would play out, but that's something that you would hope for if you're a Vikings fan if this happened. This almost feels likely. If Darnold has moved on from and Rodgers is in free agency, I feel like this could happen, unless they just want to fully invest in J.J. McCarthy, because the Vikings could make a run at a Super Bowl right now, right? They finished the year 14-3, we're at 13-4, something along those lines. They could have, in my opinion, they were an elite quarterback away. Maybe they had other pieces they were missing, but to me, the Vikings were an elite quarterback away. A fully healthy Vikings team was an elite quarterback away from winning a Super Bowl. Aaron Rodgers could be that. This is the only team that I feel like Aaron Rodgers truly could go to, right, at this point in his career. If not, it's retirement. And I feel like Rodgers might end up being like Bill Belichick, because it does to some degree feel like Rodgers has more in the tank. It feels like he might have more to give to the league. But if he doesn't, because same with Bill Belichick, it felt like Bill Belichick still had more to give. But he kind of fell by the wayside and no one really wanted him, and he is now coaching in college after taking a year off. Aaron Rodgers could be like that, where just no one really wants him. There's not a good fit. No one needs him, right? No one needs him in particular. The Vikings are the only caveat to that, in my opinion. I really wonder, is he a Super Bowl caliber quarterback? Is Aaron Rodgers the type of guy that can go out and win you a Super Bowl? I don't know. On a great team like Minnesota, maybe. But is that worth the risk? Is it worth Minnesota maybe giving up a year of this core roster in its prime, having to deal with more free agency signings in the offseason, right? Rodgers is not going to play for someone bad or be a transitional guy. His ego, I think, is too large for that. He wants to win another Super Bowl. Minnesota, to me, is the only possible fit. The question is whether or not Minnesota or Aaron Rodgers fits with Minnesota, right? I think Minnesota fits with Aaron Rodgers. Does Aaron Rodgers fit with Minnesota, right? Does Minnesota want to take a risk on Aaron Rodgers and say, you've been our worst rival forever. Maybe you can win us a Super Bowl real quick. I'm interested to see if that can happen. I'm interested to see if Rodgers can do it, right? Maybe he's that guy, maybe not. It'd be very fun and flashy and interesting and crazy if that announcement was made. He wants to win another Super Bowl. He could try to have the Bet Favre trajectory. If not, this could be it for Aaron Rodgers. We've seen him talk about careers in politics, and I'm sure he'd have some media presence if he retired now. So Aaron Rodgers is a guy that he's got other interests. He's got other things he wants to do. He could just retire. Could be it for him. Or he goes to the Vikings and makes a run to the Super Bowl. I hope that happens just for the storyline perspective. I think it'd be super fun and interesting if Aaron Rodgers did that. That's the only fit. Minnesota is the only team for me that I feel like could bring on Aaron Rodgers, and that's the only team that I feel like he could want to go to himself. We'll see how that goes. We'll see how it plays out. If it's the Vikings, it's the Vikings. If it's not, it's retirement. But that's sort of my thoughts on some of the speculated on landing spots for Aaron Rodgers as he leaves New York.